Hey everybody, welcome back. Fundamental P here, and this is the fundamentals of music part 3. I just realized that I have this drink sitting here on the keyboard, and I know that growing up you were never allowed to have drinks anywhere near a piano, anywhere near a keyboard. You can see my keyboard has like smoothies spilled on it and like all sorts of stuff that's accumulated over the years. So bad habit. Okay, please don't do this. Don't have drinks on top of your keyboard. I guess that's what my mom always used to tell me. So, but I have my drink here because I like to stay hydrated, and I just thought I'd tell you this is kombucha. I'm a huge kombucha fan. Like, I love kombucha, and this particular kombucha is Revive Kombucha. And it's made up in Petaluma, California, and just want to put a shout out to Revive. This is ginger lime. And I'm a big fan of Revive. I like to switch it up. I usually have several different types of kombucha in the fridge, but one of my main staples is Revive Kombucha, and one of the things I like is that they make it in a bigger container. I'm looking at it right now. It looks like 60 ounces. I think it ends up being a little bit cheaper when you buy it that way, but also, you know, cuts back on, glass, and I feel like it's a little more sustainable to have a larger container. Anyway, Revive Kombucha, shout out Petaluma, California. They have great, I like all their flavors. I haven't had one of their flavors that I didn't like, but this particular one is ginger lime, and man, it is tasty. So check it out, Revive Kombucha. All right, we're back. You're saying, why are you talking about kombucha? This is supposed to be the fundamentals of music part 3. Well, you're right. I don't know what else to say. You're right. Now check it out. We are going to explore in a little more detail some of the things that we talked about in the last video. So we looked at some intervals. And the first interval we looked at was perfect unison. I was mentioning in the last video, that to me just sounds like one note. I can't even tell that it's two notes being played at once. But anyway, that is perfect unison. Another example of that is where I'm singing the note and the same note is being played on the keyboard. That's also perfect unison. Because my voice sounds so different from this keyboard patch, I think I can more easily differentiate the fact that there really are two notes happening there, that perfect unison when I'm singing along with the keyboard. But nonetheless, this is also perfect unison. Okay. So the other one was a minor second. And that was like C and C sharp. Then we had a major second, C and D. I forget what I called this. I think I called this a minor third, which is C and D sharp. The next one is C and E, and that's called a major third. C and F is a perfect fourth. C and F sharp, augmented fourth. C and G, a perfect fifth. C and G sharp, augmented fifth. I'm going to play that again because I don't really play that root note very well there. C and A, a major sixth. That was not a major sixth. That was weird. That was some weird chord, but I liked it. Okay, so C and A is a major sixth. C and A sharp, an augmented sixth. C and B, a major seventh. C and C, in this case, a perfect octave. Fascinating. Anyway, so one of the things I wanted to explore in this video is some of the alternate names. So one of the things that we talked about in the very first video is the fact that we have these black keys on the keyboard, and when I name the note above C, I can call that C sharp. But that note happens to also be located below D, so another way to name that is to call it D flat. So this black note here is C sharp. It is also D flat. Okay, it has two names. Well, intervals work the same way. Okay. This is a little bit weird. I find it weirder to talk about it in relation to perfect unison because I just don't really deal with perfect unison as a musician very often, or at least not in terms of music theory discussions. But anyway, but let me start with, for example, let's start with a major second, okay, which is C and D. So this is a major second. That's a major second. Notice that below the major second, okay, well, how do I describe this? So basically we have a major second, which is formed by playing C and D, okay, a major second. If I play C and D flat, that becomes a minor second. So we have major, a half step below major. That's one way, I guess I can just describe it that way. So if the second note, rather than being D, is a half step below D, that becomes a minor second, right? So a minor second interval will result from playing, it's like almost like you're playing the interval that's a half step below the major second. So here we have C and D, we have a major second. We have C and D flat, we call that a minor second, okay? Well, it turns out that there's another term. So when you lower something a half step, okay, rather than calling it flattening, in terms of intervals, we call it a minor, right? So we have a major second that results from playing C and D. We have a minor second that results from playing C and D flat, okay? Well, it turns out, and I mentioned this last time, what interval results from playing the note that's a half step above D, right? So if this is a major second, what's this? Well, you could consider that an augmented second, okay? So kind of like this note is D and this note is D sharp, this interval is a major second, and this interval is an augmented second, okay? So an augmented second results in playing the root note along with the note that's a half step above the note that results in a major second. So C and D is a major second, C and D sharp is an augmented second, okay? C and D is a major second, C and D flat is a minor second, okay? Well, with that in mind, then the idea of the augmented, right? The augmented second was when we played C and D sharp instead of C and D. Well, wait a second though. This minor second that results from playing C and D flat, couldn't we also think of that as somehow an augmented, well, what is it, right? This was called unison when we played C and C. So playing C and C sharp, instead of thinking as a minor second, you can think of that as augmented unison, right? Because this note here, while it's a half step below the second, it's also a half step above the first, or the root, right? And yeah, so it's so interesting to me. So here we have perfect unison. Then we have what we can consider augmented unison, okay? Well, we can also call that a minor second, since this is a major second, okay? Then we have an augmented second, but couldn't that also be called a minor third, since this is a major third? Yes, so we end up, like I was saying earlier, we end up with multiple names for the same intervals. So that's what this is about right now. So let's talk about this, okay? So this is really interesting. I haven't yet told you about diminished. This is fascinating. So check this out. So we have a major third. We have a minor third. And the interval below that would be called a diminished third. And you might say to me right now, fundamental P, you just told us a few minutes ago, in fact, you've told us several times that that's a major second. And I would say to you, you're absolutely right. The interval that's called a major second can also be called a diminished third, right? It has two names, okay? So let's look at this again. So we have a major third, a minor third, a diminished third. We have a major second, a minor second, and an augmented second, right? So these multiple names for these intervals, that's kind of what I want to talk about today. All right, so let's go through them. Perfect unison can also be called a diminished second. And you might think, fundamental P, are you crazy? No, check it out. Here's the major second. Here's the minor second. The one below that would be a diminished second, and that would be perfect unison. Okay. Now, a minor second could also be called augmented unison, right? Because it's a half step above perfect unison. All right. Then we have the major second, and I already mentioned to you this could also be called a diminished third, if you want to call it that. Okay. A minor third could also be called an augmented second. I've mentioned that as well. Okay. Then we have a major third. Okay. Well, this is a perfect fourth, so that major third could also be called a diminished fourth. Isn't that weird? And then you might say to me, well, what about the minor fourth? And that is a fantastic question that maybe someone could answer out there. What I'm assuming is that when an interval is called perfect, we have designated that the interval a half step below a perfect, for example, a perfect fourth, is just called a diminished fourth, right? It's rather than a minor fourth. Okay, so I think that's just by convention. But if anybody out there knows the answer to that question, let me know. Why is the interval that's a half step below a perfect fourth not called a minor fourth? Instead, it's called a diminished fourth. Okay. Okay, so we have the perfect fourth. Wouldn't that also be an augmented third? Right? So here's a major third, and here's an augmented third, which is identical to a perfect fourth. Okay. Then we have, I called this an augmented fourth. The first time I showed you this, I called it an augmented fourth, and I was like, well, I'm gonna name them all augmented as we're moving up the keyboard, right? As we're ascending through this chromatic scale. But an augmented fourth could also be called a diminished fifth. Okay. Well, why isn't it a minor fifth, fundamental P? The only answer I have for you is because it's a perfect fifth. And we have, by convention, decided to call the interval that's a half step below a perfect interval a diminished interval. Okay? So it doesn't go perfect minor, it goes perfect diminished. But here it goes major, minor, diminished, right? Major third, minor third, diminished third. Whereas we have perfect fourth, diminished fourth, perfect fifth, diminished fifth. And again, someone out there, man, if you have a better answer to that question, please drop me a comment and I will mention it in my next video. Okay. Perfect fourth. Well, let's talk about the sixth here. Let's kind of move forward. So this is a major sixth. This would be a minor sixth. Let me try this again. Major sixth. We have a minor sixth. And then this should be a diminished sixth. Right? Major, minor, diminished. Well, that's a perfect fifth. So it turns out a perfect fifth is a diminished sixth. Isn't that fascinating? Okay. Then we have, okay, so we have the minor sixth that could be called an augmented fifth. because it's a half step below the major sixth, but it's also a half step above the perfect fifth, right? So for perfect, we have the perfect fifth, the diminished fifth, and then right above it, we have the augmented fifth, okay? So perfect fourth, diminished fourth, augmented fourth. Fascinating. I love this stuff. Okay. And then we have we have a major sixth. Now what else could that be called? Well, let's take a look here. We have a major seventh here, minor seventh, right? Major seventh, minor seventh, diminished seventh would be the same as a major sixth, okay? And then here, the minor seventh, it's a half step below the seventh, but it's also a half step above the major sixth. So this interval can be called a minor seventh or an augmented sixth. Fascinating is what I was about to just say. Fascinating. Okay. A major seventh is also a half step below the perfect octave. So it could also be called a diminished octave, right? So a major seventh could also be called a diminished octave. And then this is, I was going to say it's messed up. It's not messed up at all. A perfect octave is also a half step above a major seventh. So this perfect octave can also be called an augmented seventh, right? So augmented, I think of a half step above. Minor, I think of a half step below. Diminished, I think of 2 half steps below or a whole step below, unless the original interval is perfect, in which case an augmented fourth or an augmented fifth is going to be 1 half step below the, oh gosh, I got that wrong. A diminished fifth or a diminished fourth will be a half step below the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth. And as a matter of fact, a diminished octave is a half step below the perfect octave, okay? And then augmented is always a half step above, right? Regardless of whether or not it's perfect or, I think that was correct. Regardless of whether or not it's perfect, the interval is perfect, okay? So I would encourage you to just have fun with this. Remember that fundamental P, right? Have fun with this. Don't go do this and feel pressured and feel stressed out and I got to name all these things and I got to figure out what all the names are. Like, just have fun with it. If you're interested, if you're hanging in here and you're watching this video, this is awesome, okay? Because I imagine that some people are they're just going to drop out. They're going to stop watching it. Oh, I'm overwhelmed or I'm not interested or whatever. But if you're still watching this video, clearly you have some sort of interest in music, and I hope that you find this to be interesting and fun. And so ideally, you know, some of you don't have keyboards and some of you may not be able to afford keyboards. And so I don't want to say that, you know, you got to have a keyboard if you're going to follow along here. I've got these keyboards and that's why I'm making these videos for you. If you can, and you do have access to a keyboard, even one that you can just use, just have some fun with this, right? Have some fun with this. Perfect unison. Oh my gosh, that's also a diminished second because this is a major second, this is a minor second, and so therefore this must be a diminished second, okay? And then this minor second could also be thought of as augmented unison, right? Because it's a half step above perfect unison. So have some fun with this, these intervals, and don't forget, if you can, just see how these intervals make you feel. Is that a pleasant sounding interval to you? One of the things we'll talk about is, does an interval feel resolved? Does it feel complete? Does it feel like we're home? Or does it feel like we're on our way to something, but we haven't gotten there yet? And that's a really interesting concept, I think, in music. Does this interval, this perfect fourth, feel any different to you than this perfect fifth? So I'm just gonna cut to the chase. I'm gonna just give it away here. Okay. Some people would suggest that this perfect fifth, woo, we're home, baby. There's nowhere we need to go. We are just settled in. Right? Whereas with this perfect fourth, beautiful, but it feels unresolved. And the classic movement here would be this perfect fourth if we're in church. Maybe I'm just saying, I've heard this in church so many times. Amen. And now we're resolved. Now we're home, right? Now we feel like, oh man, and what is that? That's a major third. So the perfect fifth, some people will suggest, feels like it is resolved, man, and we are just, we're there. There's nowhere to go from there. Of course, we can go somewhere, but sure feels like, man. Whereas this fourth, while beautiful, it's longing to go somewhere. Where's it longing to go? Amen. Maybe down to the perfect, to the major third. I don't know. Another thing I want to explore, and I think we'll talk about this in the next video. God, we're going to talk about triads, and there's so much we have to discuss. But when we talk about this minor second or this augmented unison, I don't think I've ever called it augmented unison in my life, but I'm calling it that right now because I made this video and I suggested to you that it has to. So this minor second results from playing C and the C sharp that is a half step above that root note C. I don't know about you, but man, it feels like something's wrong or something. I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm home. I feel like, dude, let's get out of here. This is weird. But if I play this root note C and the C sharp that's located an octave above this one, it just sounds different. It's interesting too. We could do it another way. Isn't that fascinating? Or even, I mean, I'm going to be honest, still feels unresolved and like, I love a minor second. It just has a particular quality to it or a particular color to it. I think like I was mentioning in the last video. Okay, how about this? How about the major second here? As opposed to maybe this? Or perhaps this? That's where it feels like it needs to go to me. It feels like it's just wanting to go somewhere. Where? I don't know. Maybe there. Anyway. So experiment with the quality of these intervals. Experiment with the sound of these intervals, the color of these intervals. Experiment with the way you feel when you hear these intervals. That's all I'm going to say for now. Revive Kombucha, if you want to try it, Petaluma, California. Ginger lime. Like I said, every flavor I've tried is wonderful. Look, they are not sponsoring me. This was just on there because I was drinking it, and I thought I should probably tell my viewers what this yellow liquid is, and that's what it is. Revive Kombucha. All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there. I'm going to come back at you with more content, and that's it for now. If you like this video, please like it. And if you really like it, please subscribe because there'll be more content coming. And tell your friends, and hopefully we can get more people turned on to music. All right. Thanks, everybody.